What if I told you that the closest the world ever came to nuclear war wasn't during a missile launch, or an airstrike, or even a political standoff? It happened deep under the ocean, inside a cramped Soviet submarine with 3 men arguing in the dark, one of them screaming to fire a nuclear torpedo, another overwhelmed by heat and fear, and the third quietly refusing to destroy the world. This is the real story of how one man, Vasili Arkhipov, stopped global nuclear war by saying one word: no. October 1962. The Cuban Missile Crisis. The world was on a knife's edge. The United States had discovered Soviet nuclear missiles being placed in Cuba, just 90 miles off the American coast. President John F. Kennedy responded with a naval blockade. Soviet ships approaching Cuba would be intercepted. Anything could trigger a war. While the world held its breath, a far more dangerous situation was brewing beneath the Atlantic Ocean. 4 Soviet submarines, each carrying a single nuclear torpedo powerful enough to vaporize an entire aircraft carrier, were ordered to sail to Cuba. These submarines were old, noisy, and not designed for the hot Caribbean waters. Their crews battled extreme temperatures, lack of fresh air, and near constant harassment from U.S. Navy ships dropping practice depth charges, signals telling them, "Surface immediately." One of those submarines was the B-59. And aboard the B-59 was a quiet, calm Soviet officer, Vasili Alexandrovich Arkhipov. But Arkhipov wasn't the captain. That role belonged to Valentin Savitsky, a proud, high-strung officer who had been pushed to the breaking point. Temperatures inside the submarine reached 50 degrees Celsius, 122 degrees Fahrenheit. Carbon dioxide levels were so high that sailors fainted at their posts. They were out of contact with Moscow and had no idea whether war had already begun. All they knew was that American ships were attacking them with explosions and surrounding them with sonar. Inside that metal tube, deep underwater, every sound felt like the beginning of death. On October 27th, known today as Black Saturday, the U.S. Navy dropped signaling depth charges on B-59, trying to force it to surface. To the exhausted and terrified Soviet crew, it felt like they were being attacked. Captain Savitsky snapped. He shouted that war must have already started, that they were under attack, and that dying honorably was better than surfacing in humiliation. He decided to launch the submarine's nuclear torpedo. And according to Soviet naval protocol, he didn't need permission from Moscow. He just needed agreement from all 3 senior officers aboard. The political officer said yes. The captain said yes. Only one man stood between that torpedo and global nuclear war: Vasili Arkhipov. Arkhipov wasn't a loud man. He wasn't known for speeches. But he had something the others didn't: calm judgment. And the world is lucky that he did. He stood firmly against the order. He insisted that they should surface instead. He argued that the Americans might not be attacking, that they needed to follow procedure, that launching a nuclear weapon without certainty would be suicidal. Not just for them, but for humanity. In the suffocating heat and chaos, surrounded by panicking sailors, with war seemingly moments away, Arkhipov refused to agree. He argued for minutes that felt like hours. If he failed, a nuclear explosion would erupt in the Atlantic, the U.S. Navy would retaliate instantly, and nuclear war would begin before any leader could call it off. Finally, with tension reaching its breaking point, Arkhipov convinced Captain Savitsky to stand down. No torpedo was launched. No ships were destroyed. The B-59 surfaced, humiliated, exhausted, and nearly dead. But the world was saved. When the submarine returned to the Soviet Union, the crew wasn't praised. They were reprimanded for surfacing and failing their mission. Arkhipov received no medal, no honor, nothing. His role in preventing nuclear war remained classified. He went back to his quiet life, never boasting about what he had done. Years passed, then decades. The world had no idea what happened that day. Meanwhile, Arkhipov lived peacefully with his wife, raising a family, never mentioning that he had single-handedly prevented the deaths of hundreds of millions of people. It wasn't until 2002, 40 years after the event, that the truth came out. Former Soviet officers revealed the details. US officials confirmed how close the world had been to nuclear annihilation. Historians began digging deeper, and one shocking realization emerged. Without Vasili Arkhipov, we might not be here. His calm judgment stopped a nuclear launch that would have forced the United States to retaliate. NATO analysts later estimated that if that torpedo had been fired, full-scale thermonuclear war would have followed. Cities would have burned. Nations collapsed. The world irreversibly changed. And the strangest part? Arkhipov never thought of himself as a hero. His wife later said he didn't like to talk about the submarine, that he considered his decision simply the right thing to do. Before his death in 1998, he never knew the world would someday learn his story. He never knew he'd be called the man who saved the world. Today, historians, politicians, and scientists all agree. The closest humanity ever came to extinction was prevented not by powerful leaders, not by armies, not by technology, but by one calm man, deep underwater, thinking clearly when it mattered most. Remember his name, Vasili Arkhipov. A man whose quiet courage saved the world without firing a single shot. And thank you for watching and supporting the channel. These stories deserve to be remembered. And your time and interest keep history alive. More unbelievable wartime secrets and forgotten heroes are coming soon.